In the gilded halls of Ethermore Palace, where whispered secrets hold more power than swords, and loyalty can be bought with gold, Captain Marcus Thorne has spent 15 years believing he served a righteous crown. But when duty calls him to the princess's chambers one fateful evening, he will discover a truth so horrifying that it will shatter everything he thought he knew about honor, justice, and the very kingdom he has sworn to protect. Some secrets are buried so deep that when they surface, they don't just change lives. They topple thrones. The storm clouds gathered over Ethermore Palace like dark omens, their shadows dancing across the ancient stone walls that had witnessed centuries of royal intrigue. Captain Marcus Thorne adjusted his ceremonial armor as he strode through the torchlit corridors, his weathered face betraying none of the unease that had been growing in his chest for weeks. At 42, he had served the crown faithfully for 15 years, rising through the ranks from a common soldier to the most trusted guardian of the royal family. Tonight, however, something felt different. The palace buzzed with an unusual tension. Servants hurried past with downcast eyes, their usual chatter replaced by nervous whispers. Even the other guards seemed on edge, their hands resting unconsciously on their sword hilts as they patrolled the marble hallways. Marcus had noticed these subtle changes over the past month, but King Aldric had dismissed his concerns with a wave of his jeweled hand, claiming that the approaching winter always made the staff anxious. As Marcus rounded the corner leading to the East Wing, he encountered Sir Roderick Blackwood, the king's chief advisor and a man whose silver tongue had earned him both wealth and influence. Blackwood's usually impeccable appearance seemed disheveled tonight, his dark hair slightly askew and his expensive robes wrinkled as if he had been pacing for hours. "Captain Thorne," Blackwood called out, his voice carrying a note of forced casualness. "How fortuitous to encounter you this evening. I trust all is well with the palace security?" Marcus studied the advisor's face, noting the slight tremor in his hands and the way his eyes darted toward the shadows. "Everything appears to be in order, Sir Roderick. Though I must say, there seems to be an unusual atmosphere in the palace tonight. The servants appear quite distressed." Blackwood's laugh was hollow and didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, you know how staff can be during the changing seasons. Perhaps you should focus your attention elsewhere this evening. I believe there are some concerns about the outer perimeter that require your immediate attention." The suggestion felt more like a command, and Marcus felt his soldiers' instincts sharpen. In all his years of service, Blackwood had never shown interest in security matters, preferring to leave such concerns to the professionals. The advisor's sudden involvement raised red flags that Marcus couldn't ignore. "I appreciate your concern, Sir Roderick, but I've already conducted a thorough inspection of the outer defenses. They are secure. My current duty requires me to check on the inner chambers, particularly the princess's quarters. King Aldric specifically requested that I ensure Princess Lina's safety tonight." The color drained from Blackwood's face at the mention of the princess, and he stepped closer to Marcus, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Perhaps that check could wait until morning. I'm sure the princess is quite safe and likely wishes for privacy. Young ladies of 17 often prefer not to be disturbed during their evening routines." Marcus's suspicion deepened. Princess Lina had always been gracious about security checks, understanding that they were necessary for her protection. She had never once complained about the brief inspections that were part of standard protocol. Blackwood's insistence on avoiding her quarters was both unusual and alarming. "I'm afraid I must insist, Sir Roderick. The king's orders were quite specific, and as captain of the guard, I cannot shirk my responsibilities based on assumptions about the princess's preferences. If she prefers privacy, she can certainly inform me herself." Blackwood's composure cracked slightly, and Marcus caught a glimpse of something that looked remarkably like panic in the advisor's eyes. "Captain, surely you understand that there are matters of state that sometimes require discretion. Perhaps we could discuss this privately in my chambers over a cup of wine." The offer was clearly a diversion tactic, and Marcus felt his warrior instincts fully engage. Something was seriously wrong, and every fiber of his being told him that whatever was happening involved Princess Lina's safety. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family with his life, and no amount of political maneuvering would prevent him from fulfilling that duty. Sir Roderick, with all due respect, my duty to the crown supersedes any social obligations. I will be conducting my security check as ordered, and I will be doing so immediately. If you have concerns about this protocol, I suggest you discuss them with King Aldrich in the morning. Without waiting for a response, Marcus turned on his heel and continued toward the princess's quarters, leaving a visibly agitated Blackwood behind him. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The portraits of past kings and queens seemed to follow his movement with their painted eyes, their expressions appearing more ominous than majestic in the flickering torchlight. The east wing of the palace had always been Marcus's favorite section. It housed the royal family's private chambers and was decorated with beautiful tapestries depicting the kingdom's glorious history. Tonight, however, the familiar surroundings felt alien and threatening. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more oppressive, and the very air seemed thick with unspoken secrets. As he approached Princess Lina's chambers, Marcus noticed that the usual guards were absent from their posts. This was highly irregular, as the princess's quarters were supposed to be protected at all times, especially during the evening hours. He made a mental note to investigate the security lapse and ensure that whoever was responsible for the oversight would face appropriate consequences. The heavy oak door to the princess's chambers was slightly ajar, which was another violation of protocol. The door should have been securely closed and locked from the inside, with guard stationed outside to ensure no unauthorized entry. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he approached, his hand instinctively moving to his sword hilt. Voices drifted from within the chamber, too low for him to make out specific words, but carrying an urgent, almost desperate quality. He recognized Princess Lina's voice, but it sounded different somehow, strained and frightened in a way that made his blood run cold. There were other voices too, male voices that he couldn't immediately identify, but that carried an authoritative tone that suggested they belonged to people of high rank. Marcus paused outside the door, torn between his duty to announce himself and his growing suspicion that announcing his presence might put the princess in greater danger. His training had taught him to assess situations carefully before acting, and every instinct he possessed was screaming that something terrible was happening behind that partially opened door. Taking a deep breath, he positioned himself to peer through the crack in the door while remaining hidden from view. What he saw in that moment would forever change not only his understanding of the royal family he had served so faithfully, but his entire perception of honor, duty, and the true nature of power. The princess's normally pristine chambers had been transformed into something that looked more like a meeting place for conspirators than a royal bedchamber. Several men in expensive clothing stood around a large table that had been brought in for the occasion, their faces illuminated by an unusual number of candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Princess Lina sat in a chair that looked more like a throne, but her posture was not that of someone in command. She appeared pale and frightened, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the arms of the chair. Among the men, Marcus recognized not only Sir Roderick Blackwood, but also Lord Aldrich Ravencrest, the kingdom's treasurer, and Sir Garrison Ironhold, the head of the royal council. These were some of the most powerful men in the kingdom, and their presence in the princess's private chambers at this late hour, without proper protocol or announcement, was deeply troubling. But it was the conversation he began to overhear that truly chilled Marcus to the bone, and made him realize that he had stumbled upon something far more sinister than a simple breach of etiquette. Part 2. Marcus pressed himself closer to the doorframe, straining to hear the conversation that would shatter his world. Lord Ravencrest was speaking in low, measured tones that carried the weight of absolute authority. "Princess, you must understand that your cooperation in this matter is not optional. The arrangements have been finalized, and the gold has already changed hands. Lord Malachar of the Northern Reaches expects his bride to arrive by the next full moon, and we cannot afford to disappoint such a valuable ally." Princess Lyanna's voice trembled with barely contained terror. But Lord Malachar is known throughout the realm for his cruelty. His previous wives have all died under mysterious circumstances. You cannot seriously expect me to marry such a monster. My father would never approve of such an arrangement. Sir Garrison Ironhold let out a harsh laugh that echoed coldly in the chamber. Your father, dear princess, is no longer in a position to approve or disapprove of anything. His recent illness has left him quite incapacitated, and the kingdom's affairs must be managed by those with clearer minds and steadier hands. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. King Aldrich had appeared perfectly healthy just days ago during their regular security briefings. The suggestion that he was somehow incapacitated was shocking enough, but the casual way these men discussed his condition suggested something far more sinister than natural illness. What have you done to my father? Lyanna's voice rose in pitch, her composure finally cracking. He was fine last week. He was laughing and making plans for the harvest festival. You've done something to him, haven't you? Blackwood moved closer to the princess, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made Marcus's skin crawl. Now, princess, your father is simply resting under the care of our most trusted physicians. Dr. Morvain has assured us that with proper rest and medication, the king should recover fully. Of course, his recovery depends greatly on your cooperation with our plans. The threat was clear, and Marcus felt a rage building in his chest that threatened to overwhelm his training. These men were not only betraying their king, but using his condition to coerce his daughter into a marriage that would clearly result in her death. The princess they were discussing as if she were a piece of property was the same young woman he had watched grow from a spirited child into a compassionate and intelligent leader who had won the hearts of the common people. Princess Lyanna stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the stone floor. I will not be a pawn in your political games. I demand to see my father immediately. If he is truly ill, then I should be at his side, not being bartered away like cattle. Lord Ravencrest's expression hardened, and he gestured to two men who had been standing silently in the shadows. Marcus recognized them as mercenaries rather than palace guards, their scarred faces and crude weapons marking them as men who sold their loyalty to the highest bidder. I'm afraid that's not possible, princess. Your father is under strict medical supervision and cannot be disturbed. As for your cooperation, it seems you still don't fully grasp the gravity of your situation. One of the mercenaries stepped forward, his hand resting on a wicked-looking dagger at his belt. The threat was unmistakable, and Marcus watched in horror as fear replaced defiance in the princess's eyes. You see, Ravencrest continued, his voice now openly menacing. Lord Malachar has offered us a substantial sum of gold for your hand in marriage, along with military support that will help us maintain stability in these uncertain times. In return, we have promised to deliver a willing and cooperative bride. Now, we can achieve this cooperation through gentle persuasion, or we can explore other methods. The choice is entirely yours. Marcus had heard enough. Every principle he had sworn to uphold, every vow he had made to protect the innocent, demanded that he act immediately. But his military training also warned him to assess the tactical situation carefully. He was one man against at least 5, including 2 armed mercenaries. A direct assault would likely result in harm to the princess, which was exactly what he was trying to prevent. As he considered his options, another voice entered the conversation, one that made his blood boil with righteous fury. Dr. Cornelius Morvain, the king's personal physician and a man Marcus had trusted implicitly, stepped out of the shadows. My lord, Dur, Morvain said, addressing Ravencrest with obvious deference. I must remind you that the medication I've been administering to His Majesty is quite potent. If the dosage were to be increased, or if certain complications were to arise, his condition could become permanent rather than temporary. The implication was clear and horrifying. These conspirators were slowly poisoning King Aldrich, keeping him incapacitated while they seized control of the kingdom. The doctor who had sworn to heal was instead participating in regicide, and the advisors who had sworn loyalty were planning treason of the highest order. Princess Lina sank back in her chair, the full weight of her situation finally becoming clear. "You're killing him. You're murdering my father to steal his throne." Such dramatic language, Princess Blackwood said with mock concern. "We prefer to think of it as ensuring a smooth transition of power during troubled times. Your father's recent decisions have been increasingly erratic. The kingdom requires steady leadership, and we have graciously stepped forward to provide it." "And what of my brother?" Lina asked desperately. "Prince Edmund is the rightful heir. Even if something happens to our father, he should inherit the crown." The conspirators exchanged glances that sent chills down Marcus's spine. Lord Ravencrest was the one who delivered the crushing blow. Prince Edmund's ship was lost in a storm 3 days ago while returning from his diplomatic mission to the southern kingdoms. We received word this morning that there were no survivors. Of course, we haven't yet found an appropriate time to share this tragic news with your father, given his delicate condition. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Prince Edmund had been like a younger brother to him, a brave and honorable young man who would have made an excellent king. The suggestion that his death was anything other than natural seemed impossible, but given what he was witnessing, Marcus now suspected that the prince's ship had encountered more than just bad weather. "No," Princess Lina whispered, her voice barely audible. "Edmund can't be dead. He promised he would return safely." "You're lying to me." "I'm afraid not, Princess." "Which means that with your father's illness and your brother's tragic death, you are now the sole remaining heir to the throne of Ethermore. Your marriage to Lord Malachar will create a powerful alliance that will ensure the kingdom's prosperity for generations to come." The princess's composure finally shattered completely, and she began to sob with a heartbreak that made Marcus want to charge into the room immediately, regardless of the consequences. But Sir Garrison's next words froze him in place. "Of course, if you prove unwilling to fulfill your duties as the last remaining member of the royal bloodline, arrangements could be made for you to join your brother in his watery grave. I'm sure we could find a suitable accident that would pave the way for a regency government led by those wise enough to guide the kingdom through these difficult times." The threat was explicit and chilling. These men were prepared to murder the entire royal family to achieve their goals. Marcus realized that he was witnessing not just a kidnapping or a forced marriage, but a comprehensive coup that would eliminate the rightful rulers of Ethermore and replace them with a corrupt oligarchy. As he struggled to process the magnitude of what he had discovered, Marcus heard footsteps approaching from behind him in the corridor. He turned to see 2 more mercenaries walking toward the princess's chambers, their weapons drawn and their expressions grim. It seemed that the conspirators were taking no chances with security, despite their apparent confidence in their plan's success. Marcus had to make a decision immediately. He could attempt to retreat and gather loyal guards to mount a rescue, but there was no guarantee that he could return in time to prevent harm from coming to Princess Lina. Alternatively, he could attempt to intervene now, but his chances of success against so many armed opponents were slim at best. As the approaching mercenaries drew closer, Marcus made his choice. He would not abandon his duty to protect the royal family, even if it cost him his life. But rather than charging blindly into battle, he would use the tactical advantages available to him. The palace's architecture included several secret passages that he had learned about during his years of service, knowledge that could give him the element of surprise he desperately needed. Moving quickly but silently, Marcus retreated to a tapestry that concealed one of the hidden doorways. The passage would allow him to enter the princess's chambers from an unexpected angle, potentially giving him the opportunity to even the odds before the conspirators realized they were under attack. As he disappeared into the secret passageway, Marcus heard Lord Ravencrest's voice growing more impatient and threatening. The conversation was clearly reaching a critical juncture, and the princess's life hung in the balance. Marcus knew that the next few minutes would determine not only her fate, but the future of the entire kingdom. The narrow passage was dusty and dark, but Marcus knew it well from his security inspections. It would take him directly behind the large bookshelf in the princess's sitting area, providing him with both cover and a strategic position from which to assess the situation before acting. As he moved through the cramped space, he began to formulate a plan that might just save Princess Lina's life and expose the conspiracy that threatened to destroy everything he had sworn to protect. Part 3. Marcus emerged from the secret passage behind the ornate bookshelf with the silent precision of a seasoned warrior. Through gaps between the ancient volumes, he could observe the entire scene unfolding in Princess Lina's chambers. The princess sat frozen in terror while the conspirators continued their heated discussion about her fate and the kingdom's future. Dr. Morvain was now providing disturbing details about King Aldrich's condition. The compound I've been using creates symptoms that perfectly mimic a wasting disease. To outside observers, His Majesty appears to be suffering from a natural decline brought on by the stresses of kingship. However, if we were to cease the treatments immediately, he would likely recover within a fortnight. And if we were to increase the dosage? Lord Ravencrest inquired with chilling casualness. Death would occur within 3 days, appearing to be the natural progression of his illness. The court physicians I've consulted believe he's suffering from the same condition that claimed his father. Marcus felt sick realizing that even King Aldrich's father might have been murdered by this same conspiracy, their poisonous influence reaching back generations. The scope of their treachery was beyond anything he could have imagined. Princess Lina raised her head, her tear-stained face showing a flicker of the royal determination that had made her beloved by the people. Even if you force me into this marriage, the nobles will never accept your authority. Lord Hadrick of the Western Marches, Sir Garrett of the Northern Fortress, Lady Miriam of the Eastern Provinces, they've all sworn loyalty to my father and our bloodline. They'll see through your lies eventually. Blackwood smiled coldly. Actually, Princess, you'll be pleased to know that we've already addressed those potential complications. Lord Hadrick suffered a tragic hunting accident yesterday. Apparently his horse threw him into a ravine. Sir Garrett's wine was unfortunately contaminated with a rare poison that mimics heart failure. As for Lady Miriam, well, she's discovered that her granddaughter has been taken ill and is being cared for by Dr. Morvain's associates. The systematic elimination of the kingdom's loyal nobility painted a picture of a conspiracy that had been years in the making. Marcus realized that every unexplained death, every convenient accident, every mysterious illness among the royal supporters over the past months had likely been orchestrated by these traitors. One of the mercenaries near the door shifted impatiently. "My lord, how much longer must we maintain this charade? The girl's cooperation is not essential for our plans. We could simply eliminate her and claim she died of grief over her father's illness and brother's death." "Patience, Corin," Ravencrest replied. "A willing bride creates far fewer complications than a tragic death. Lord Malachar specifically requested a living wife, and his gold comes with certain expectations. Besides," Dr. Morvain added with academic interest, "I've developed a new compound that creates a state of docile compliance. A few drops in her morning tea, and the princess will walk to her wedding with a smile, completely unaware that she's sealing her own doom." Marcus had heard enough to understand that these monsters planned to drug Princess Lina into submission before delivering her to a man who would certainly murder her. He also realized that the conspiracy extended beyond mere political ambition. They were systematically destroying everyone who could challenge their authority while enriching themselves through alliances with foreign powers who cared nothing for Ethermore's welfare. Drawing his sword silently, Marcus positioned himself for maximum tactical advantage. The bookshelf would provide cover while he assessed the positions of all 6 men in the room. The 2 mercenaries near the door were his primary concern, as they could either escape to summon reinforcements or use Princess Lina as a human shield. Taking a deep breath, Marcus burst from behind the bookshelf with the fury of a man who had discovered the ultimate betrayal of everything he held sacred. "In the name of King Aldrich and the crown of Ethermore, you are all under arrest for high treason." The explosion of action that followed was swift and violent. The first mercenary reached for his weapon, but found Marcus's blade already piercing his heart before he could clear leather. The second mercenary, Corin, was more experienced and managed to draw his sword, but Marcus's superior training and righteous rage gave him an overwhelming advantage. Dr. Morvain screamed and dove behind an overturned table, while Blackwood grabbed Princess Lina and pressed a dagger to her throat. "Stop right there, Captain, or the princess dies immediately." Marcus froze, his sword still dripping with the blood of the fallen mercenary. "Release her, Blackwood. Your quarrel is with me, not with an innocent young woman." "Innocent?" Ravencrest laughed harshly from his position near the window. "She's the last obstacle to progress, Captain. The old ways of hereditary monarchy are outdated. The kingdom deserves to be led by men of vision and intelligence, not by accident of birth." "Men of vision?" Marcus spat. "You mean men who murder children and poison the innocent? You're nothing but common criminals dressed in noble clothing." Lord Ravencrest's face darkened with rage. "We are the architects of a new order, Captain. Your precious king has been weak and indecisive, more concerned with poetry and philosophy than with the hard realities of governance. Under our leadership, Ethermore will become a true power among the nations. By selling its princess to a known killer and forming alliances with thugs and mercenaries." Sir Garrison stepped forward, his own sword now drawn. "By making practical decisions based on realistic assessments of power. Lord Malachar controls the largest army in the northern reaches. His marriage to our princess ensures that his forces will support our new government rather than invading our territory." Princess Lina struggled against Blackwood's grip, her voice muffled but defiant. "The people will never accept your rule. They know the difference between legitimate authority and stolen power. The people will accept whatever government can provide them with safety and prosperity." Dr. Morvain called out from behind his improvised cover. "They care little for abstract concepts of legitimacy when their children are fed and their homes are secure." Marcus realized that these men truly believed their own justifications, convinced that their treachery was somehow patriotic. This made them even more dangerous, as fanatics were often willing to accept any level of violence in service of their cause. "And what the other kingdoms?" Marcus demanded, still holding his sword at ready, but unable to advance while Blackwood threatened the princess. "Do you think they'll simply accept the sudden deaths of an entire royal family?" King Theodore of Westmarch was Prince Edmund's closest friend. Queen Isabella of the Southern Kingdoms considers Princess Lina like a daughter. They'll demand investigations, which is precisely why the princess's cooperation is so crucial, Ravencrest explained patiently. "Her marriage to Lord Malachar will demonstrate continuity of the bloodline and provide legitimacy to our regency. Foreign observers will see a natural political alliance rather than a suspicious seizure of power." The depth of their planning was impressive and terrifying. They had anticipated every possible complication and developed solutions that would allow them to maintain the appearance of legitimacy while systematically eliminating anyone who could challenge their authority. Marcus studied the room carefully, looking for any tactical advantage that might allow him to save the princess without getting her killed in the process. The chamber had 3 windows, but they were too high and too small to provide realistic escape routes. The main door was blocked by Sir Garrison, who appeared competent with his weapon despite his advanced age. "Captain," Princess Lina said suddenly, her voice carrying a strange note of calm determination. "Do you remember the stories you used to tell me about the old knights and their code of honor?" Marcus met her eyes and saw something there that made his heart race with both hope and terror. She was planning something desperate, and she was trusting him to understand and support whatever action she was about to take. "I remember, Your Highness. Honor above life, duty above comfort, truth above convenience. And what was the most important virtue of all?" "Courage, Princess. The courage to do what is right, regardless of the personal cost. Blackwood tightened his grip on her throat, sensing that some form of communication was taking place. Enough of this nonsense. Captain, you will drop your weapon immediately, or I will cut the princess's throat right here and now. Instead of complying, Marcus shifted his weight slightly and adjusted his grip on his sword. Princess Lyanna caught the subtle movement and gave an almost imperceptible nod. She understood what he was planning, and she was prepared to play her part in what would be either a brilliant rescue or a tragic final stand. "I'm sorry, Sir Roderick," Marcus said formally, "but I cannot comply with that request. My oath to the crown supersedes any personal considerations, including my own life." "Then you've condemned her to death," Blackwood snarled, raising his dagger to strike. That was the moment Princess Lyanna chose to demonstrate why she was truly her father's daughter. Instead of remaining passive, she suddenly drove her elbow backward into Blackwood's solar plexus while simultaneously stomping down on his instep with all her strength. The combined assault caused him to loosen his grip just enough for her to twist away from the dagger's path. Marcus was already in motion before Blackwood could recover, his blade singing through the air in a perfect arc that would have decapitated the traitor if Sir Garrison hadn't intervened with a desperate parry that saved his fellow conspirator's life while leaving him dangerously off balance. Part for the clash of steel rang through the princess's chambers as Marcus engaged Sir Garrison in desperate combat, while Princess Lyanna rolled away from Blackwood's reaching grasp. The older knight proved to be more skilled than Marcus had anticipated, his experience compensating for what he lacked in youth and strength. "Seize the princess!" Ravencrest shouted to the remaining mercenaries who had rushed into the room upon hearing the commotion. "We cannot afford to lose her now." But Princess Lyanna had not spent years training with the kingdom's finest tutors without learning more than just languages and mathematics. Her martial arts instructor, Master Chun for the Eastern Kingdoms, had insisted that a royal must be prepared for any situation, including those where traditional protection might fail. As the first mercenary reached for her, Lyanna executed a perfect leg sweep that sent him crashing into an expensive vase, while simultaneously grabbing a heavy bronze candlestick that she wielded with surprising effectiveness. "Stay back," she commanded with royal authority that made even hardened killers hesitate momentarily. Marcus found himself pressed hard by Sir Garrison's aggressive assault, the older man fighting with the desperate fury of someone who knew his life depended on victory. Their blades locked to the crossguard, and Garrison hissed through gritted teeth, "You're too late, Captain. Even if you kill us all, the king will be dead within days, and the kingdom will descend into chaos without proper leadership. Then, I'll make sure Princess Lyanna survives to claim her rightful throne," Marcus replied, breaking the lock and driving Garrison back with a series of lightning-fast strikes that forced the older knight to give ground. Dr. Morvain had produced a small crossbow from his medical bag and was attempting to line up a shot at Marcus, but the swirling combat made it impossible to fire without risking injury to his allies. "Hold still, you fools!" he screamed in frustration. Lord Ravencrest had drawn his own weapon, an ornate sword that looked more ceremonial than practical, but his attention was focused on the princess rather than Marcus. "Your Highness, please reconsider your position. We can still reach an accommodation that benefits everyone involved." "The only accommodation I'm interested in," Princess Lyanna replied, while fending off another mercenary with her improvised weapon, "is seeing you all hanged for treason." Blackwood had recovered from the princess's attack and was advancing on her again, this time with murder clearly in his eyes rather than capture. "If we cannot have a cooperative princess, then we'll simply have to settle for a tragic martyr whose death galvanizes the kingdom against foreign threats." Marcus realized that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. More mercenaries would arrive soon, and the conspirators were becoming increasingly desperate and willing to abandon their original plans in favor of simple violence. He needed to end this confrontation quickly before reinforcements could arrive or the princess could be seriously injured. Drawing upon techniques he had learned during his military service in the border wars, Marcus began to fight with a controlled savagery that stunned his opponents. His blade became a blur of deadly silver that forced Sir Garrison into an increasingly desperate defense, while simultaneously threatening any mercenary who tried to approach Princess Lyanna. Impossible, Garrison gasped as Marcus's sword sliced across his sword arm, drawing blood and weakening his grip. No palace guard fights like this. I wasn't always a palace guard, Marcus replied grimly. Some of us earned our positions through battlefield valor rather than political connections. The revelation that their primary opponent was a combat veteran rather than a ceremonial guardian clearly shook the conspirators' confidence. Dr. Morvain's hands trembled as he continued trying to aim his crossbow, while Lord Ravencrest began backing toward the window as if contemplating escape. Princess Lyanna had managed to position herself near the fireplace, where she armed herself with a poker that proved much more effective than the candlestick. When Blackwood lunged at her with his dagger, she parried the strike and delivered a devastating counterstrike to his wrist that sent his weapon flying across the room. "You little witch," Blackwood snarled, cradling his injured hand. "Your defiance will cost you everything." "My defiance is what separates royalty from peasants," she replied with icy dignity. "A true ruler protects their people, even at the cost of their own life." The sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor indicated that the commotion had finally attracted attention from elsewhere in the palace. Marcus felt a surge of hope, but it was immediately tempered by uncertainty about whose side the arriving guards would take. If the conspiracy reached deeply into the palace hierarchy, the reinforcements might actually make the situation worse. Sir Garrison, weakened by blood loss and clearly losing his duel with Marcus, made a desperate gambit. Instead of continuing the sword fight, he suddenly threw his weapon at Princess Lyanna while simultaneously lunging at Marcus with a hidden dagger. The surprise tactic nearly succeeded, as Marcus was forced to deflect the thrown sword rather than defend against the dagger thrust. But Princess Lyanna proved equal to the challenge, gracefully dodging the flying weapon while maintaining her defensive position near the fireplace. At the same time, Marcus managed to turn Garrison's desperate lunge into the older knight's downfall, allowing the dagger to pass harmlessly by while delivering a pommel strike to the temple that sent his opponent crashing unconscious to the floor. Dr. Morvain finally managed to fire his crossbow, but his target selection proved fatally poor. Instead of aiming at Marcus, he attempted to eliminate Princess Lyanna, apparently deciding that her death would solve more problems than the captain's. The bolt flew straight and true, but Marcus had been watching the doctor from the corner of his eye and threw himself in front of the princess just as Morvain pulled the trigger. The crossbow bolt struck Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him to one knee, but failing to inflict a mortal wound. The injury was painful, but manageable, and, more importantly, it filled him with a rage that burned away the last vestiges of restraint he had been showing his opponents. "Now you die," Marcus growled, rising to his feet with his sword still firmly in his grip. Lord Ravencrest chose that moment to demonstrate why he had survived decades of political intrigue. Rather than standing and fighting, he suddenly grabbed a burning log from the fireplace and hurled it at the chamber's expensive tapestries, immediately setting them ablaze. "If we cannot control the kingdom, then perhaps it deserves to burn," he declared with the fanatical gleam of a man who had lost everything and wanted to take his enemies down with him. The fire spread quickly, fed by the dry ancient fabrics and wooden furnishings that filled the chamber. Smoke began to fill the room, making it difficult to see and even harder to breathe. Dr. Morvain screamed in panic and ran for the door, abandoning his allies in favor of his own survival. Marcus realized that they had very little time before the fire became uncontrollable. The princess's chambers were located in one of the oldest sections of the palace, where the dry wood and stone construction would feed the flames rapidly. If they didn't escape soon, they would all perish together regardless of political loyalties. "Princess, we must leave immediately," he called out, but Lyanna was engaged in a final confrontation with Blackwood, who had retrieved another weapon and was making one last attempt to complete his mission. "Not without justice," she replied, her royal training overcoming her natural fear. "These men murder my brother and are killing my father. They will answer for their crimes." Lord Ravencrest laughed maniacally as the flames grew higher around him. "Justice? There is no justice, only power and the will to use it. We would have given you a clean death, but now you'll burn like the witch you've proven yourself to be." Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Rather than attempting to capture the remaining conspirators, he focused entirely on ensuring Princess Lyanna's survival. Ignoring the pain in his wounded shoulder, he charged past the flames and bodily lifted the princess, carrying her toward the secret passage he had used to enter the chamber. "No," she protested. "We cannot let them escape to threaten others. Your life is more important than vengeance, Your Highness. The kingdom needs you alive to restore proper rule." As they disappeared into the hidden passage, Marcus could hear Blackwood and Ravencrest arguing behind them about whether to follow or attempt their own escape through the main door. The last thing he saw before the passage entrance closed was Dr. Morvain's terrified face as the physician realized he was trapped in a burning room with two madmen who no longer cared about their own survival. The secret passage was narrow and dark, but it led directly to Marcus's own quarters in the guard barracks, where they would be safe from immediate pursuit. As they moved through the cramped space, Princess Lyanna finally allowed herself to show the fear she had been suppressing. "Captain," she whispered, "do you think my father could be saved?" If Dr. Morvain was telling the truth about the poison, then yes, Your Highness. We'll find physicians we can trust and reverse whatever they've done to him. "And my brother? Do you think Edmund might still be alive?" Marcus paused, considering whether to offer false hope or honest uncertainty. "I don't know, Princess. But if there's any chance he survived, we'll find him. I promise you that." They emerged from the passage into Marcus's spartanly furnished quarters, where the captain immediately began gathering supplies and weapons for what he knew would be a dangerous journey. The conspiracy was too widespread and too well organized to be eliminated by a single night's work. They would need allies, evidence, and, most importantly, time to plan a campaign that would restore legitimate rule to Ethermore. Princess Lyanna stood at the window, watching the flames consume her former chambers while tears streamed down her soot-stained face. "They took everything from me," she said quietly. "My father, my brother, my home, my future. How does one rebuild a kingdom from ashes?" Marcus joined her at the window, his own wounds forgotten in the face of her greater loss. "The same way one builds anything worthwhile, Your Highness. One stone at a time, with patience, courage, and the help of good people who believe in justice." In the distance, they could see palace guards rushing to fight the fire, while other figures moved in the shadows with purposes they could only guess at. The conspiracy had been exposed, but its full extent remained unknown. How many other nobles, guards, and servants were part of the plot? How far did the corruption reach, and how many innocent people would suffer before it could be rooted out completely? "Captain," Princess Lyanna said finally, turning away from the window with an expression of grim determination that reminded Marcus powerfully of her father in his younger days. "What you witnessed tonight makes you the most dangerous man in the kingdom. They'll never stop hunting you. Then, we'd better make sure we find them first, Your Highness. A kingdom is worth fighting for, and some oaths are more important than life itself." As dawn broke over the palace, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus and Princess Lyanna began planning their campaign to reclaim her birthright and restore justice to Ethermore. The Royal Guard's discovery had cost them everything they thought they knew about their world, but it had also given them something perhaps more valuable: the absolute certainty of their cause and the unshakable bond between a warrior and the princess he had sworn to protect. The conspiracy had won the first battle, but the war for Ethermore's soul was just beginning.